After retiring in 2022, Abrams launched Abrams+Angell to help small businesses achieve social, environmental, and financial goals. His latest book, From Founder to Future, is a guide to creating CommonWealth companies focused on shared ownership and purpose. Mitch Kapor is a tech industry pioneer, founder of Lotus Development Corporation, and the creator of Lotus 123, the groundbreaking spreadsheet that helped popularize the IBM PC in the 1980s. He also co-founded the Electronic Frontier Foundation, served as founding chair of the Mozilla Foundation, and a founding partner of Kapor Capital, led investments in startups focused on equity and opportunity for underserved communities. Please welcome me and please join me in welcoming them to the last talk of the festival in our tent today. Thank you so much, everybody.
So thank you all for coming. We're just going to dive right in. Have some time for Q&A at the end. But John, you've been on the vineyard for decades. You founded your business here. It was rooted here. It was the crucible for your ideas and your practice about good business. Let's start with the origin story. How did you get here? And what were you trying to do? And what did it turn into?
So that was 50 years ago. But in 1973, after years of living in remote parts of Vermont, Northern California, British Columbia, Oregon, and my friend and co-worker, Mitchell Posen, and I had developed this passion for design and building that came from fixing up old, dilapidated houses and building new ones out of barn parts. We had no idea what we were doing. It was just fun. And in '73, we built a shop in Rockland County on South Mountain Road and started a little cabinet business. And then my parents asked us to come to the vineyard in 1975 to build a house. We came. We thought we'd be here for about 8 months. We'd have this house done, pocket full of money, back to Vermont. And a year later, we were still toiling away on this handcrafted house, and the money was all gone. Somebody else asked us to build a house, and we stayed. We did that. And we had little experience, rudimentary skills, no business sense, and we just stirred together whatever ingredients we had into a practice, but we would never figure out what the recipe was until decades later. And we just pursued. And 12 years into it, two friends who had been employees from the start. Well, my partner Mitchell went on to farming. I was left with the business. And two friends who had been there from the beginning. One of them's Pete Ives, who's sitting right there, came to me and said, we've been talking to each other, and we do not want to take the usual route and form our own business. We want to stay here for our careers. But we need more of a stake. And I was touched, and I could have easily made them partners at that point. But I thought, what if we do our job well? The chances are that this will happen more and more. What if we could invent a structure that would welcome people in over time? We were very lucky. We did not have to invent a structure at all. We stumbled on the worker co-op, and at that time, there were about a dozen in the U.S. Interestingly, most of those, that was 40 years ago, most of those, like Equal Exchange, the Rainbow Grocers Cooperative, Cooperative Home Care Associates, most of them are thriving today, 40 years later. But anyway, that seemed like a perfect fit. And we, on January 1, 1987, the company became owned by the employees, and there were 3 or 4 owners at the time. Everybody else was on a path to ownership, and the ownership bridge had been crossed. So that distributed ownership, but it did not distribute leadership. And in 2005, I took a 6-month sabbatical to write a book and to experiment with distributed leadership. 6 months ended, the book wasn't done. We had planned this departure very carefully, but it turned out that it didn't work very well at all. Morale tanked. It was pretty much a mess. So I came back, spent 6 months. We spent 6 months figuring out what did we do wrong, what could we do right, how could we do this again. And I went off again for 6 months, finished the book, came back, there was traction, and the system that was put in place then has really endured with adjustments till today. So in 2014, we decided to, I turned 65, and we decided to work on the leadership transition and start to figure out what the next generation of South Mountain would be. A 5-person leadership team emerged of the 40 people that were in the company by that time. And we spent years figuring out how to build the leadership capacities inside the company. We knew that we did not want to go outside the company. In 2019, this leadership team buckled down, developed the leadership capabilities that we needed, and Deirdre Bohan emerged as basically the first among equals CEO. And we headed toward my retirement date, which was December 31st, 2022. And about 6 months before we got there, we looked around at each other and we went, we're there. We've got 6 months to just polish this mirror. And in the end, it was really like this 6-person leadership team. I kind of slipped out in the night, and it was 5. And it's thrilling to watch them do a tremendous job. And it's going forward, and I think they're launched on the next 50 years. That wasn't too long to tell about 50 years, right?
It is an amazing arc, and you have a huge legacy. The question that comes to my mind is, writing a book is a lot of work, especially if you're not a professional author. I mean, it is a lot of work in any case. And, who reads books anymore, actually? I mean, yeah, we all do, but it's kind of out of fashion. What prompted you to go sort of back to the artist Garrett and lock yourself up and write another book? And what are you hoping to accomplish in that? And then we'll dive into the ideas. But
the first part's easy, and the second part's more complicated. So I always loved to write, and the experience of writing that first book in 2005, which was strictly a labor of love, and I didn't really care what happened to it. Whatever impact it had was, I loved that, but I had no goal. And when I finished at South Mountain, I knew I wanted to write a book, and I knew that it had a very different purpose. So, and by the way, my editor at Barrett Kohler originally said, when he agreed to do the book, he said, he told me the 10 awful truths about publishing a book in 2023 or whatever it was, and the 2 corollaries, which is, 1, that nobody will read your book. Nobody wants to read a book. They want the message. You don't know which 8 or 10 pages they're going to read, so it all has to be great. And the second one is that nobody's going to buy your book either. And we have to sell 20,000 copies or we can't do it. He said, you ready? And onward it went. And you know the drill, right? But I want to give you some context to answer the part about what might be accomplished with this. So from the 1930s to the 1970s, labor unions helped build a prosperous middle class by getting great wages and benefits for workers in the U.S. And at the end of that time, in the 1970s, the typical corporate CEO made roughly 20 times what the typical worker made. Now, as that has risen to 250 times or 300 times, if working people's compensation had kept pace with CEOs, the minimum wage right now would be over $100 an hour. We know that is not the case. Nothing like that has happened. So for those 50 years while I was at South Mountain, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party both fully left working people behind in this country. Meanwhile, well, I'm going to say a little more. Well, meanwhile, right now, there are 3 million small businesses in the U.S. with founders over 55, and something is going to happen to every one of those in the next 15 or 20 years. They're going to transition somehow, and literally trillions of dollars of assets will change hands. Some of those companies will be passed down in families. Many of them, unable to find a buyer, will unceremoniously close the doors and leaving gaps on Main Street, leaving jobs lost. But the successful ones will be the targets of strategic buyers and rapacious private equity. And I see this book as providing an alternative to that. So one of my favorite quotes in this book is from a guy named Eric Rieger, who built a great company in Chicago called Webbit. And he talks about how he has watched his friends of his age who have made strong companies sell them to private equity. And he says to a person, everyone that he knows, they have cashed their 7 or 8 figure check and they're absolutely miserable. They have left the workers who helped them build that company out, and they're unhappy with what's going on with the company. So I call that the fat wallets and broken heart syndrome. But what those companies do, what private equity does when they buy small business and amalgamate them, is they tend to put them together, they move them from communities, they sell them for parts, and most of these people who create these small businesses are proud of them, they have meaning to them, they want them to go on, and yet the people that advise them, the bankers, the attorneys, the accountants, the succession planning consultants, the financial planners, they don't know about the employee ownership options available to them. And this is a way that can reward both those founders who have invested time and energy and the people who helped them build them.
So it's political. You're creating alternatives and disseminating a different approach. Is that a fair statement, a kind of a kinder, more humane form of capitalism?
I think it is, but the book is educational because so many people, if they're presented with an alternative like that, are excited by it, and every one of these companies, the book is full of guidance of that sort, but it's also full of stories of exemplary companies that most people do not know about. And the hope is that each reader, each business is different, the orientation is different, the values are different, that each reader will find one of these methods or one of these stories that will speak to them and they'll say, yes, this is what I want for my business, it's what I hope for my business, this is what we really should be, I'll take it. And so if the book can connect with business owners and employees in businesses, because there are 32 million people in those 3 million businesses, and most of them don't know about these options. They don't know to bring them to founders who might be receptive.
So, do you want to share kind of a favorite story or two about businesses, not your own, that you think exemplify some of what you're talking about? This is like the sort of the free sample download on Amazon.
I mean, there are so many good ones. Well, one that's very close to home. So Brett Tolley, a fisherman in Cape Cod, the way he tells it is about 5 or 6 of us were sitting around in my living room bemoaning the fact that the prices for fish kept being lowered by wholesalers, and it was so difficult for us to make a living doing the work that we love. And they started thinking about it, and they said, well, what if we become price makers instead of price takers? Why don't we all set the same prices? And they went and talked to an attorney about this, and the attorney said, yeah, that's price fixing. But this same attorney said, you could form a cooperative and all sell together and set your prices and legally do exactly what you're talking about. Today, just a few years later, 20 people own the Chatham Harvesters Cooperative, and they are thriving. They have a community-supported fishery where people can buy fresh fish, good fish. They know where it came from. They know who caught it. They know that they care about the ecology of the water. And as Brett says, so when we realized what we could do with this, we realized that we could make fishing be a force for good. And I just think that's such a wonderful story, and they're doing a great job, too. Now, a kind of very different one, Ward Lumber in a small town in the Adirondacks is a company that started in 1890 when Harvey Ward started milling lumber for farmers from logs that they brought so that they could build their buildings. His 4 sons ran it into the 40s and then opened a commercial lumber yard. And the company passed down to Jay Ward as, I think he was the 4th generation owner of this company, which had expanded to 2 locations, a major mill. And when he realized that his daughters were not interested in taking over the company, they thought about it, they worked in it, and he got enamored of the idea of it becoming a worker co-op. So I think in 2022, about 80% of the 60 employees of Ward Lumber became owners of what was now a worker co-op. And when I visited in 2023, a woman named CJ, who was the operations director, said, so the first year dividend that I received allowed me to buy a house, something I didn't think would happen for years and years. And it was life-changing, she said. And she said, basically, we're a family-owned company making a new family. So I loved that one, too. Like that?
Like that.
You want more?
Like that. Well, I want to take it, expand the focus a little bit. Does this scale? I understand there are a lot of small businesses, millions, and there's a tremendous amount of resources in the book for them. I come from the tech world where people are raising venture capital, and the AI world where they're getting crazy valuations. And and we didn't discuss this in advance, so you could just say, Mitch, no curveballs, please. But what's the dialogue? What do you have to say to sort of people in that world if they come to you for advice, or young people just starting out but very tech focused, stars in their eyes about how big it can get, how fast? What kind of conversation would you want to have?
The first one is, have you ever heard the word enough? So sometimes it doesn't have to be big to be good, and in fact, but when you give that argument, people say, but you can't have impact unless it gets big. This is so not true. The employee ownership world in the U.S. is still relatively small, although growing fast. But worldwide, it's huge, and there are many kind of ecosystems of co-ops that work together. A great example is the Emilia-Romagna province of northern Italy, which is the part that surrounds the city of Bologna, and happens to have one of the most prosperous economies in the world and one of the most progressive governments. And the two work together, and in Emilia-Romagna, there's a system of, a collection of about 5,000 worker co-ops, none of them large, but they work together and collaborate, all of them helping other ones do things that they could not do alone. And they have this spectacular high-tech manufacturing going on. So it can scale without each company being gigantic.
We should find out more about that. You talk.
Wait, let me just tell you, Mitch, that there is an organization in the U.S. doing something like that. It's called the Industrial Cooperatives. The Industrial Commons. It's in western North Carolina, in an area that was at the heart of the textile and furniture industry, all of which got offshored. It's all gone, completely dead in the water, and this organization is restoring it, but restoring it with a series of co-ops, with Emilia-Romagna as the model, and also doing it and making a circular economy where the different companies are using the waste from each to make the products of the other. So we can do this.
This sounds like a good subject for a follow-up conversation. I've made a note. I was going to ask you to talk a little bit about the role of B Corps in all this, because that is a thing that if people have heard anything about sort of sustainable businesses, they may have heard, oh yes, so-and-so, whether it's Patagonia or someone else, we're a B Corp. But I don't think everybody knows what that is. Maybe talk a little bit about what that is and its importance.
Yeah, it's a great question. I see it as one of the core. What I see for businesses that really want to get to this place of being a force for good is 5 transition. The one from proprietary ownership to widely accessible ownership shared by whoever wishes to. The transition from first generation leadership to the second generation leadership, unpreserved purpose to permanently preserved purpose, and governance and management from top down to democratic and collaborative, and then finally this, the impact from business as usual to B Corp force for good, the phrase I've used a few times here. B Corp comes from B Lab, an organization that started in 2006, and right now, and they had two purposes. The first was to make a certification program that would rigorously assess how well companies do achieving social purpose. And the second was to make state legislation all over the country to allow for beneficial corporations so that a company could make its articles of organization as a beneficial corporation and be required to report its beneficial activities each year to the state, but also thereby not be required to prioritize profit over other activities. And in both realms, they've been phenomenally successful. Right now, there are 10,000 B Corps in 100 companies all over the world. And it's quite a process. It takes some doing. But they've also come under fire to some degree because as larger companies have become interested, some people think that the standards have eroded. My own experience with the organization, which starts when they started, is that they are a learning organization and always changing and always listening and always hearing and hopefully adjusting. But I think it's a very, an imperfect but very important system. And at the same time, I think they now have passed this legislation in 45 states maybe, plus DC, and I'll never forget when they did it in California, and Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia, was standing on the steps at the State House in Sacramento the moment it was possible to sign up, saying, "This preserves our purpose forever." And he followed that up by doing a perpetual purpose trust with the company. So I think the B Corp idea is important. When they first started, they asked us, South Mountain, to certify, and we said, well, we're a local company, and it won't do much for us. And then we also said, plus we do all this stuff anyway. And then we said, but we really should support this movement. And so we did it, and what we found out is that we didn't do all this stuff anyway. We learned tremendously and have continued to learn as we recertify.
If I could add one thing just on top of that. For businesses that have outside investors, so in the tech world, venture capital, but anyone who does have that, the founder choosing to register as a public benefit corporation with the state gives them some protection because, as you were saying, you have a legal right, actually an obligation to pursue other goals besides profit, to follow your social purpose, which has to be in your charter. So it gives an effective way of pushing back against investors should it come to that, but it also has very important signaling value if you're going out and raising money. This is who we are. We're certified as a B Corporation. We're a public benefit corporation. And like you, I see growing momentum around that.
Great.
Let me turn it back again. You talk about these 5 transitions that South Mountain went through, that other companies go through: ownership, leadership, mission, governance, impact. What was the hardest one for you in your arc?
The one that takes the most work, I think, generally, is leadership. Building leadership over time. And I actually advocate for early ownership transitions. The ownership transition is easy. It's transactional. It's less emotional. It's it's not to say that it's easy, but it's less complex. And but building leadership that can take the company forward is big and important. So I think that's maybe the hardest. But the other, it's a forever work to get good at collaborative management. Yeah, I mean, they're actually all challenging.
Well, let me ask you about a question about leadership, because there is something very appealing about democratizing decision making. It's aspirationally what the ideals in which this country was founded. We're having a bit of a struggle now, but it applies into business as well. Very appealing. On the other hand, sometimes innovation comes when some really stubborn person insists on trying something differently. Now, if there's Steve Jobs at Apple, which was not democratic leadership, it happens and the world changes. So the question is, in the context of the small businesses you're talking about, how do you see a tension between democratizing leadership and innovation, or not?
I don't really see a tension. I see a danger, though, and that is that when there is shared ownership, that the ownership becomes risk averse. But one of the important things about the worker co-op model is that you are separating in a very clear way the decisions that owners make and the decisions that management makes. And you don't want a large group of owners who don't have the training or the inclination or the orientation to be making decisions that management should be making. So hopefully that you have the right people in positions of leadership so that innovation happens. But I don't think I think your question is a really good one.
In the tech world where things keep changing very rapidly, it is the case more often than not that the interesting things happen when somebody just insists on it, or if they can't convince anybody else, they go off and start it on their own, and they say, "See, I made one of these. Now what do you think about it?" So
here's an example of a company that has, I think, dealt with this in a masterful way. How many people here have ever eaten a pastrami sandwich at Zingerman's in Ann Arbor or ordered from their catalog? So Zingerman's, which started off as a little deli in Ann Arbor, got pressure all the time to franchise. It's a great little deli, and people wanted them to franchise. People wanted them to expand as fast as they could, as far as they could, and they would just go, "No, we're an Ann Arbor company, and we're staying an Ann Arbor company, and that's who we are." But they developed a system of any employee at Zingerman's that had an idea for another business, they could pitch it to them, and if they believed that it had a chance of success, they would fund it, finance it, and bring it under their umbrella. It's now the Zingerman's community of business. There are 11 businesses, 700 or 800 employees, 80 or 90 million dollars a year, and they keep changing and innovating in that way.
Like that. We have time for some questions. Do we have a mic, or people just stand up and? There's a mic right there. Yeah. So if you like have a question, please come up to the mic. And while people are thinking of their questions, one quick thing for you: beyond just reading the book and being one of the fortunate 20,000 who buy it, if you're interested in this, either online resources or next steps or something you could Google or ask ChatGPT. I'm, again, betraying what world I come from.
So, yes, there are a tremendous number of resources. And but what I would say is those resources are contained within the book. Read the book. See if you find the kind of guidance that you want toward the place where you want to go. But there's an amazing employee ownership infrastructure in this country at this point, which didn't exist when we first converted South Mountain. But it's confusing because there are different kinds of employee ownership. And so I say be one of those 20,000 people and read the book, and you will find the resources you need right there.
Question.
Yes, thank you. John, it's great to see you and hear from you. Full disclosure, John and me and my family have a relationship that goes back many years.
Sure do. A good one.
So my question is the relationship between your first book and this book. And is it important, do you think, to read the first book before one reads the second book? I read your first book many years ago. I loved it, but it's on my shelf, and it's been sitting on that shelf for a long time. So should I? What are your thoughts on this? Should I reread that book before I read your new book?
It's a great question, Andrew. Thank you for asking that. The answer is no. You probably. It's not necessary to read that book, and it's a little embarrassing and a little outdated anyway. But this is a very different book, and that book was memoir-ish and very community-focused, small community-focused. This new book, my hope, and here I may overreach, but I think that in a certain way, it's an antidote to what has become so common in this country right now, the cruel behavior rather than generosity, the deep corruption. In certain ways, this advocates for something fundamentally different and a fundamentally way of treating people, a fundamentally different way of doing business. And one of the things that I have seen happens with employee-owned companies where there really is this collaborative nature. When you work all day in that kind of environment and that kind of atmosphere, it's bound to spill over into the rest of your life with kinder parenting, better civic participation. So my hope, Andrew, is that in some modest way that this book will have that kind of an impact.
Thank you.
What part in, or is there a part to be played by an owner, for example, thinking in different terms and deciding that the first step is profit sharing without any, responsibility in terms of leadership being granted, but giving everybody, so they do at least have a chance to look at the books.
It's a wonderful step along the way, and it's a very easy thing to do. So I'm a big advocate. It's a long walk, Bill.
So you kind of touched on a couple of these things as you were having your back and forth, but I'm curious about, I know that you have had a successful transition of leadership in your company, but what was that process like, and what are the challenges with, you touched on ownership versus management, but the decision making that does have to occur to be an effective company probably has some challenges when it's diffuse. And so you did come up with a first among equals, as you described, Deirdre. But what was that process like, and what do you think is a good way of handling that kind of transition of leadership?
That's a great question, too. In our case, the best way to learn to do that was for there to be a crash of 2008. It just, that crushing, amazing collapse and a cascade of cancellations in our case, it really taught me, I thought that my job as the leader of that company was to protect others from stress and take care of it. And nothing could be further from the truth. And in fact, I find it embarrassing that it took me so long to learn that my job was really to bring people to the table and be transparent about everything that was happening and let them help solve it. So I think that's what you get, is you get, when you do that, and that's kind of the whole theory of open book management, let everybody impact their work and the success of the company. So that was a learning process. Open book management is very, very strong at South Mountain today, which it was not then. And leadership development is just a constant ongoing process. So, for example, I led that company for almost 50 years, and I started when I was very young. Deirdre, who's the CEO now, was 57 when she stepped into that job. She'll probably be there 10 years at most. So at the moment when I retired and they started leading, they also started thinking about the next generation. And so right now, as she's only a couple of years into it, they are working on what comes next. So I think it's a constant process.
I think we have time for one last question.
So I'm taking a double risk in asking this because I arrived late, so you may have covered the topic. That's
all right.
one. And two, I'm asking you to do a thought experiment, which would be an employee-owned and managed social media firm. Would it be kinder and gentler, maybe a little bit better balance of social purpose and collective sensibility on the one hand and engagement and ad revenue on the other? You know what's behind this question, but I'd just be curious in your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, I would say that the kind of company I'm talking about, not necessarily just employee-owned, but with these Commonwealth aspects and shared collaborative management, yes, I think it's baked into the DNA to be kinder, even if it's a social media company. That's what I'd say.
So let's thank John very much for coming and talking today. Just wonderful. You're going to be signing books from Founder to Future.
Yes, but I want to thank you, Mitch. I really appreciate you doing this, and it was a great conversation, and thanks to all of you for coming.
Thank you, everybody. And please, thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, Mitch. please, everyone, go to the book sales tent, buy John's books, and support both the author and the MV Book Festival.
Yeah, we have
Thank
to
you all
sell
very
20
much.
20,000.
20,000. Let's
20,000.
start for the first 19.